There we go. All right, we are going. Welcome, everybody, to a KCN Nooner. And Jeff, you might want to turn down the volume on that phone if you haven't already. And I'm excited to be with you today for another KCN Nooner. And the topic we're talking about today is what are the top questions you should ask your partner that are going to end up deepening your connection. And I am proud to introduce the gentleman joining me today. This is Jeff Jennings. He is an elite KCN therapist and coach. Dr. Jeff Jennings has helped countless high achieving professionals, entrepreneurs, and athletes transform their marriage or love relationship. His expertise spans interpersonal forgiveness, positive psychology, and the neurobiology of relationships. He leverages cutting-edge neuroscience, attachment research, and positive psychology to help couples achieve deep connection, greater intimacy, and enduring love. His research has been widely published in top psychology journals and books. He holds a PhD in counseling psychology with over 24 years of experience. I don't call him doctor. I do just call him Jeff, but he's earned that. Welcome, Jeff. I'm glad you could join us today.
It's okay if you just call me Jeff. Thank you, Matthew. It's great to be here.
But Dr. J, that's kind of a cool title, man. I mean, the juice,
It
Julius
was,
Erving, right?
yeah, it's kind of already taken. I don't know if I can, fill
All
those
right.
shoes. It's not quite the same thing.
Oh man, I'm dating myself and yourself because a lot of people are like, "Who the heck is Dr. J?" All right, we'll move on though. We are excited. We're going to have a lot of fun talking today. And if you don't know who I am, I'm Matthew Hoffman. I'm the CIO, the Chief Inspirational Officer for Kick-Ass Couples Nation. And today we are talking about what questions can you ask your partner that's going to deepen your connection and create a stronger relationship. And so, Jeff, I love to start with a little quote. I'm going to read that to everybody. A caring question is a key that will unlock a room inside the person that you love. So let's talk about the general idea, Jeff. Why does it make a difference what kind of questions we do or don't ask our partners? Why is it important, especially in a romantic one?
Oh, wow. That's a great question, Matthew. I think it's super important because we're always changing and growing. Hopefully we're growing, but we're definitely changing, throughout our lifespan. And John Gottman calls it love maps, like it's sort of the basic building block of intimacy and friendship, just really knowing one another and feeling known by your partner. And one of the ways you do that is you ask questions, right? You need to keep asking questions throughout the course of your relationship. You can't just, assume you already know it all and stop asking questions of your partner to get to know them on a deeper level, to get to know what's going on for them in that moment or what may have changed for them over time.
Yeah, I know. I think it's one of the most dangerous things we do in relationships, Jeff, is we kind of think is one and done. Like, hey, I already know that. I'm
Hmm.
aware of that, right? Or we answered that years ago, right? When I married you, I told you that I loved you, and if it ever changes, I'll let you know, right? And
Right.
that's dangerous in a relationship. So, what questions should we be asking to our spouse or our partner? That's kind of the first
Hmm.
topic I'd like to talk about.
Hmm.
And Jeff, one of the things that we do on the Kick Ass Couples podcast, we're interviewing a couple, we always say, what did love look like for you growing up? Because I think it's so important to go back and really understand, how did your partner see love, feel love, and how was it demonstrated, expressed to them in their family of origin, whether it's parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles? Because when we understand how they were loved and if they liked it, if it worked for them, or if it didn't, it really gives us a great view inside their world. And some, maybe not, they don't want to be loved exactly how they were, but it helps us understand them more when what are your thoughts about kind of going back to going forward with that question?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. That just plays such an important role in how we develop, right? We're developing our maps for life and love during our childhood and adolescence, growing up, right? Our brain is forming during that time. And so that's how we learn to love, right? We learn by how we are loved and how we are seeing love displayed in our family of origin. So it's a critical question to ask to really understand why we are the way we are, why how we seek love and how we like to receive love, and why we do the things that we do in relationship.
So that's well, Jeff. What other questions should we be asking our partner that are going to let us know more about them and help us have a tighter relation? What else comes to your mind when you're thinking about that first point we're discussing today?
Yeah. Well, certainly, one of the fundamental questions I think is simply how do you like to show love and how do you like to receive love? This kind of gets to love languages and that's become really popular, but people can dismiss that really easily. It's like, oh, yeah, I've heard that, but it's so important because we really do have specific ways that are important to us to receive love and affection and to show that to our spouses. So that's a critical question, being able to ask that of our partners and really understand that and being willing to show them love in that way, right? I've worked with couples where, their love language is very different and, one person might be really uncomfortable with physical affection, like in public or things like that, and is just not willing to show their partner that. And it's like, having a flower bed and not watering your flowers, right? They're going to wilt and die eventually.
Yeah, I love that, Jeff. If we don't know how they like to be loved, then we're loving them the way we want to love them instead of
Mm,
what they really need. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand. I'm gonna get to another question in just a moment. We had
mhm.
one of our viewers ask a question, so I want to share that right now. She said, "What questions should we avoid to reduce disagreements or conflicts to make sure that we're not making the situation worse?" So, are there any things we shouldn't be asking our partner or talking about?
Hmm. Why did you do it that way? That's the only thing.
Ah, yeah. So
Um,
criticism, right? Not letting we wanna keep and that so what I'm hearing you saying is, let's keep criticism and
yeah,
contempt out
right.
of the questions that we're asking, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a certain way to ask that question, but I think a lot of times it comes out as a criticism, right? Like, why did you load the dishwasher like that? Why did you do that? Right? Those aren't usually helpful questions to ask our partner.
Right. Okay. So about how we approach and being mindful. So I think it's, if you're passive aggressive, right, is probably
Mm,
not what we want to do in our questions. So I think that actually to answer that question a little bit better, when you're asking your partner questions, if you do it from your own perspective, I
mm,
think, I feel, I've noticed, I wonder. If it's more about getting your own questions answered as opposed to being passive aggressive or saying, "Well, I was wondering why you did it like that," or "I don't understand." You can say, "I don't understand. I'm not
mhm,
sure. Help me get clarity," because then it's helping your education or your understanding if you truly are being truthful about that. But keeping sarcasm out of it, I think, Ashley, is a great way to go. And I think, one of my favorite things, Jeff, is if you don't know your partner's number one need at any given time. You talked about things change, relationships
mhm,
are dynamic. The way they feel today may not be the way they felt yesterday or last week or last month. And
mhm,
you want to know, is there anything that you can do in this moment to help them feel more comfortable or loved? That might be a question you ask every hour, every day,
mhm,
once a week, once a month, anything like that. But you got to be aware and in touch of what is your number what is their number one need, and are you helping support it or meet it? And I
mhm,
think a lot of people, again, they have that assumptive task. They say, "Well, they told me months ago," and you gotta know right now today. Something may have come up at work. You might be dealing with a family issue, a sibling issue, and if you're not aware of what it is, then you're not giving them the support that they need, and I think that's really a critical thing, to be aware
yeah.
of.
Absolutely. I think another question along those lines is just what is most important to you right now? You know, because that changes often, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think those are some great examples of things that we can be aware of. And another question that I came to me when we were getting ready for this, Jeff, is asking your partner if there's anything that you have done recently, unwittingly, or maybe been aware that has hurt them or that has damaged them. Because
Mm,
sometimes we do things, and depending on your partner, they may or may not tell you. And yet they're
mhm,
upset, they're angry, they're frustrated, and you're like, "Man, why am I getting the cold shoulder?" So periodically asking your partner, "Hey, is there anything that I've done, wittingly or unwittingly that maybe I wasn't aware of that's been hurtful or damaging?" Because if you're opening the door and inviting it, you can get the issue on the table and talk about it. And I think that's it takes a strong person to say, is there anything that I have done or not done, maybe you're not aware of, that has affected them in a positive or negative way? And so we had another question come in, Jeff. Where does the tone of your voice come into play?
mhm,
Let's talk about the words may be, "Hey, I really appreciate that." But if it said, "Hey, I really appreciate that," I mean,
mhm.
talk to us about tone and intent for a moment.
Yeah, that's really important too, right? Because I get caught on this one all the time. I get in trouble on this one a lot, right? Because my tone, the way I say something, I was like, well, I wasn't meaning to be critical, but the way it's spoken, the tone is so, so important. You can say something fairly innocuous, or at least what feels like it's fairly innocuous. But if you say it in a certain tone, it can come across extremely critically. And that's so important to be aware. Paraverbal communication is so important. The things, nonverbal communication, those are conveying a lot more than our actual words most of the time. So we really have to be a pay attention to that. And we condition our partners too over time. The longer we're together, we condition them to really be attuned to our tone, so they pick up on it very quickly when there's any type of criticism in our tone and the way that we're saying something, or expressing some degree of dissatisfaction or unhappiness, right? We can say that, we can communicate that with a question, we can communicate that with a statement. So how we say it, the tone that we use communicates a lot more than our words.
Yeah, I think and I love the idea about tone, but there's so much that communicates. There's obviously the verbal word,
Hmm.
there is body, how your partner is carrying and holding themselves physically. Are they open? Are they closed? Are they looking at you? Are they looking away? Are they looking through you? Are they distracted? We just talked about tone, and timing is huge too. When those questions come and when that communication happened. And we had a question come in that said paranormal communication, and I don't know if I would say it's paranormal, but it does include a lot of elements. And people talk a lot, Jeff, about
Did I
gut
say
feel.
paranormal? I meant to say paraverbal.
Paraverbal, yeah, paraverbal. So paraverbal meaning nonverbal, or is that right?
Yeah,
Paraverbal. Okay.
beyond the verbal, yeah.
Beyond the verbal, exactly. So, I think that a lot of people talk about gut feel. When you feel something in your gut, you gotta trust that because it's kind of if it's not feeling right, it probably isn't, and you can ask further questions to make sure if you've got a gut feel about something, just say, "Hey, I've got a feeling," or "I'm wondering," or "I'm not so sure." But I wanna move on to our second point. Let's turn the tables a little bit. What
Mm,
questions, Jeff, should we be asking ourselves that we're measuring, kind of self-reflecting and saying, "How are we
mhm,
doing?" And when
mhm,
it comes to what questions should we ask ourselves to figure out how we're showing up for our partners?
mhm, yeah. One question that comes to mind for me is, how is my communication, right? Am I communicating to my partner in a loving way, in a respectful way? Am I expressing appreciation to them on a regular basis? Those are questions that are really important because those are the things that we easily lose sight of in our day-to-day lives. You know, we're busy, we're working, we've got a million things going on, we got to run the kids to soccer and do all this other stuff. You know, we're feeling stressed, and those just moment to moment interactions, right? It's so easy just to sort of, miscommunicate or say things with the wrong tone, or feel express frustration and things like of that nature. So I
Yeah.
think that's a question we just need to be checking ourselves on every day, right? How was my communication today with my partner? Did I express appreciation to them?
Yeah.
Things like that.
And I think a couple of things, Jeff, I agree. And, one of the things that you wanna kinda ask yourself is, are you spending more time looking for the good and magnifying that in your partner, or are you being critical and looking for the negative so you can zap them, get them, win and show them that you're right? And, I would say that 95% or more of my communication that comes from my wife to me is positive.
Mm,
It's either supportive, maybe she has a question. Just because they have a question or they need clarification or they're reminding you of something that you may have forgotten, "Hey, babe, just wanna make sure you got this," or, "Were you able to do
mm,
that," or, "Did you do that?" And I think that I can often take that as being critical or negative because she's following up. She's not following up because she doesn't trust me. She's following up
mm,
because the ramifications of something not being done are worse than reminding me, and I remind her too, and she'll say, "Hey, thanks for the reminder. I took care of that," or, "Ooh, no, I didn't do it yet." But if look at the percentage of the
mm,
communication that you're having and ask yourself, am I focusing more on the positive and the things I love about my partner, or am I
mhm,
nitpicking and looking for those small things and magnifying the negative? And you
mm.
need to be in they need to be doing, that with you. There needs to be congruence between how good they are and the quality of the communication. I think that's huge.
Absolutely. You said something too that made me think of, the question, am I being too defensive, right? Because in the example that you use, sometimes our partner's just asking us a question because they're wanting to make sure we remembered something or need to check in if we remembered something or did something right. And they may do it in all the right ways with the right tone and everything. But we might interpret it as, yeah, of course I did it. What do you think I'm stupid? So we can get really defensive sometimes when we feel like our integrity or our competence is being questioned by our partner.
Yeah.
And that might not be the case, right?
Yeah. And two things. I was talking to another couple in some coaching recently, Jeff, and one of the things that a technique when your partner says something that gets a rise or reaction out of you is called PBR. And I'm not talking Pabst Blue Ribbon. It's not the beer, but I want to say pause, breathe, right? And reflect. So
Mm,
before you answer or respond back, boom, I'm gonna zing you back. Pause. Take a breath, calm, and then reflect and see, why would they be asking this and how can I respond based on my values and not out of emotion? And then you can respond. And I think that, it's important for you uh, to pause and not let the emotions and the feelings take over.
yeah, I love it. That's perfect.
Had another question come in on Instagram from one of our listeners. The thing is that personally, I can be confusing if you're trying to read my body language or tone. And
Mm,
that brings up a good point. We don't want to make assumptions, right? Let's say that your partner just got off a conversation or got an email or a text from a friend or something at work and it's pretty negative and their countenance is closed and it's anger and their expression is not good. If you assume that's directed towards you, then you're going to say,
mm,
well, why the heck are you so mad at me? Right. And I think that assumptions are dangerous. And I think our conversation earlier was to say, pay attention to the signs, look at the body position, look at the facial expression, listen to the tone and listen to the words and the meaning
mm.
behind them, but don't make assumptions. I think assumptions are dangerous. And I don't know about you, Jeff, but I'm a horrible mind reader, especially when it comes to my wife. And if I try to read her emotions or make a guess, I get some information maybe and some signs, but sometimes I just have to say, "Hey, is everything okay? Are you upset? Or is
Mhm.
what has happened that's changed your countenance? Because I feel like, or I'm noticing maybe something's not right with you right now." "Oh, no, it's all fine. It's not you. It's X, Y, and Z." Okay, great. But assumptions are dangerous, and I think that we definitely wanna make sure we're not assuming and acting on assumption without getting clarification.
Well,
But yeah,
I'm a horrible mind reader as well, but amazingly, my wife can often tell exactly what I'm thinking. It's scary at times, actually.
well, that's I agree with you, and that comes from experience and familiarity, and the longer you're in a relationship, you build it up and and, even if you
Mhm,
hear their words are saying one thing, but their tone or their countenance is saying another, they may not wanna burden you. My wife often doesn't wanna burden me or doesn't wanna
mhm,
make a big deal about something, but our ability to pick up on those finer cues, I think, is, pretty important. I wanna move
mhm,
kind of onto our 3rd, focus point here, Jeff, and that is, do you know how your partner views, values, and approaches the 3 Cs? Kick-Ass Couples Nation, we have the 3 Cs. There are 3 foundational qualities and characteristics, and the first of those Cs is commitment, communication, and conflict resolution.
mhm.
What kind of questions, Jeff, should we be asking our partner so that we have what we talked about, agreement or consonance on those 3 key things: commitment, communication, and conflict resolution? What kind of questions should we be asking that can bring us onto the same page so that we're not, again, making those dangerous assumptions about where our partner is and why is it important to be on the same page on those 3 key, relationship aspects?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's a great practice just to kind of go through those and say, have a conversation about how are we doing on each of these things, can I communicate in a better way to you, right? Is there another way I can communicate something to you? Like if I'm feeling upset or if I'm feeling hurt by something, how can I communicate that to you in a way where you might be able to hear me and it doesn't feel like criticism or something to that nature, right? Um,
Mhm.
Commitment, how can I show more commitment to our relationship? How can I show more commitment to you and your roles and the things that you're doing, right? How can I make you feel more supported? um,
Right.
Conflict resolution, how are we doing with this, right? Is there a more effective way we can discuss issues when we have disagreements so we can both feel like we're getting our needs met? We can compromise, we can feel like it's a win-win instead of a win-lose situation.
I love what you said, Jeff. I wanna follow up on it because I think it bears repeating is game plan, right?
Mm,
The easiest way to figure out and how to sail through conflict, for example, is when you're not in conflict to say, "Hey, what rules are we gonna play by?"
mm,
What if something comes up and we have a disagreement, let's agree now that this is kind of the rules we're going to play by. We're not going to be critical. We're not going to tear down. And we're going to do all these things. When you get in the conflict, you've established what's acceptable. And then if one of you steps out of it, you can say, "Hey, wait a minute. You're not playing by the rules. Let's go back to what we agreed and talked about." And I think that's huge. When you don't have a game plan, you have no idea where you're going. You're not prepared and you haven't gotten agreement. And that's true for commitment, knowing what your commitment is and isn't to the relationship, to your kids, to your friends, to your church, knowing the communication rules, like how are we going to communicate? You talked about that earlier and improving it, asking questions. Am I doing well there? Am I not? And
mm,
and I love that, um, a lot, and I kinda wanna move, a little bit into the whole idea of, I wanted to share a little story, with my wife, and when you talk about intimacy, Jeff, in a relationship, it is really hard sometimes to have those conversations and ask the questions, but my wife and I had a conversation not, a few years ago, and we talked about the questions I was asking was, what does she like when we're intimate with each other, and what doesn't she like? What does she wanna see more of? What did she want to see less of? Because again, I'm not a mind reader and I wanted to know because of someone who's in love with and committed to my partner, to my wife, I want to make sure I'm doing what she loves and she enjoys. And I certainly don't want to do anything that she hates, that's painful or uncomfortable in any way. And so that was an opportunity for me to ask questions to learn. And in turn, she asked me some of those same questions back. And it took us deeper. It gave us a stronger relationship in intimate ways. And it kind of unmasked the awkwardness that often can accompany those conversations.
Mhm.
So anyway, another question came in, Jeff. Why setting up rules? I think that's going to take away a little bit of your freedom as yourself to you or your partner. How would you respond to that? I mean, what kind of rules do you think we're talking about,
Mm.
and why would you or would you not want to have any rules? This is from one of our Instagram listeners right now.
Yeah, I think, when it comes to the communication part, having rules is good. Sort of basic rules, like you said, gives you a game plan. These are the ways that we're going to communicate with one another. These are the things that are most important to me in our communication. These are the things that we don't want to see present in our communication. The four horsemen, that John Gottman talks about, criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling, right? We want to eliminate those from our communication as much as possible in a relationship.
Right.
So, having some basic rules, right, actually provides, a sense of safety and trust, right? I know
Right.
that I can feel safe and I can trust my partner when we're talking about tough things because they're not just going to verbally start attacking me or do name calling or, things of that nature.
Sure.
So yeah, too many rules in a lot of other areas can be stifling, but having some basic rules when it comes to communication, I don't think that's taken away anyone's freedom. I think that's just really laying the groundwork for what healthy communication is going to look like in your relationship.
I agree, and I think we can also reframe or swap out the word boundaries for rules.
Mm,
If rules, some people say, "Well,
mm,
that's a rule, and I don't like to follow rules. I don't wanna be told boundaries," because you should each have boundaries in your relationship. Your partner should know what they can and can't do around communication, around commitment. Do they think if you're talking to a member of the opposite sex, is that cheating? Is that disrespectful? Right? Boundaries about intimacy, boundaries about conflict, where you will and won't go. It's good for everybody to say, "Hey, these are my boundaries, and I don't want these things crossed because I don't feel safe, I don't feel respected, I don't feel loved, I feel violated." It's good to have those boundaries because you don't wanna walk into an area or I call it stepping on a landmine when you've triggered your partner because you do something they don't like or that rubs
mm,
them the wrong way. So I think whether you call it rules, whether you call it boundaries, it's good to have those things understood on both sides because it raises the level of respect and trust and love in the relationship. Well, Jeff,
mm.
we're coming down to the end here, but if people want to learn more about you and find you and connect with you, we interviewed Jeff and his wife, Jessica. She's also a practitioner and works in her own private practice. Kim and I got to interview these two on our podcast. That's how we met them. And they are both KCN elite coaches, and we love having them work. But how do people find you, Jeff, if they want to connect and learn more about the good stuff you're doing?
Yeah, the greatest way to find us is on our website. It's greatestmarriageever.com. And my email is jeff at greatestmarriageever.com, or my wonderful wife is Jessica at greatestmarriageever.com. So we would encourage you to check out, what we have on our website, our blog, some resources there, and yeah, feel free to contact us if we can be of any help with to you in your relationship.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, we are glad to be working with you. Kim and I host the Kick Ass Couples podcast. If you want to have great insight and learn from masters of relationships, we'd love you to listen. Would also like to encourage you to go to MatthewPHoffman.com. If you're in a relationship and you don't know what questions to ask, or you've got obstacles that are getting in the way, I'd love to talk to you. You get a free relationship assessment call. Go to the website, sign up, and I'd love to speak with you, learn more about what you're working on, and how I can help you reach your own relationship nirvana. We are here every Tuesday with great guests like Jeff, his wife Jessica, and other fun people talking about everything relationship on our KCN Nooners. We hope you'll come back. If you have questions, we had some great ones that came in today on the live chat. If you have more questions, Jeff gave you his email. You can also reach out to me at matthew@matthewphoffman.com, and we will do our best to get back with you. But we're live every Tuesday at noon for our Kick-Ass Couples Nation at Nooner. So we hope you come back and join us again soon. Jeff, great to have you with me today. Man, time goes fast whenever we're together, but I love what
It
we get
does.
to talk about. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you guys soon.
Thanks so much, Matthew.